Hi, welcome to Studio 708. Today we're going to create pant sloper patterns. Let's create. First we're going to take our hip foundation that we created. This is my size minimal. And we're going to fold it in half across the hip line. So I want to know where this halfway point is. You can measure it or you can just fold it and be as simple as that. Then I'm going to take this and line it up with a grain line that I put on my pattern. And I'm going to square out from this point so I have something to line up to. So I'm going to take my L square ruler and go ahead and mark my hip line. Okay, so we have a guideline. So now let's take that halfway point again. And I'm going to line up with my hip line, and then I'm going to trace the hip foundation from there. Okay, so this will be my center front or my center back, depending on which one we're working on at the moment. And this is my hip level. So this will end up being my grain line. So we can go ahead and label this right now. This will be W. This will be W1. You can tell I'm from Texas, it's a W. This is our H1, and this is our H. And we're actually going to label the top of this line where when I did my hip line, my hip level here, I made sure the top of my pattern matched this grain line that I have going on. So I'm going to go ahead and mark that G so we have all this marked. Okay, from there, we're going to go ahead and mark our crotch depth. So our crotch depth should be on your measurement chart, but for this case, for our size 8, it's going to be 9 3/4. So we're going to measure down from W to what we're going to call C, 9 3/4, and mark it. Okay, so I'm lined up here. I'm going to go ahead and mark my line. This will be C. Then we're going to square out and then connect your H1 to what will be your B. And by doing that, you just square from your crotch level line up to your hip line. So we'll label this B. So if we have C, we have B. Okay, next we're going to do the crotch, the part that goes between your legs. So this right here will be your center front, or right in this case it's going to be our center front. We need the part that curves down and goes down to your crotch, and then what will be your inseam. So this measurement right here needs to be 1/4 of this measurement right here. So once again, you can measure that, or you can do this by folding. So if we fold it in half, we already have our halfway mark, and then fold that part in half again, then I know from here to here is 1/4 of this measurement. So I'm going to just use this as my guide, line this up here, and then I'm just going to put a mark out here where that measurement comes to, and then use my ruler to go ahead and connect that. Okay, we're going to label this C1. Okay, now we need to find a part right here to create that curve. So we're going to look for A, which for us, it says that we found this 1/4 part. Now find that half of that 1/4 part. So basically 1/8 of this measurement right here. Okay, now that we have this right here, we're going to go up at a 45-degree angle. So if you're using your L square ruler, you should be able to put the 0 point here and the corner of the ruler here, and that should give you a 45-degree angle right here. Go ahead and draw a guideline out. Now we need to take we need to go back to this measurement again. So we took the halfway point, we found our quarter mark. Now we need to find the 1/8 mark, or a half of this quarter mark. So I'm going to fold it again and find that mark, and then we're going to come out here and mark it right here. So this will be A. Okay. Now we have that. Now we need to get this grain line going on here. So we talked about the halfway point being here. That's because we needed this G line to be at the halfway mark of this. So think about this, if it was like a pleat or a seam running down the front of your pant, that's where this grain line is going to fall. So I'd gone ahead and drawn this on my paper, but we set this up correctly by finding the halfway point of this and lining that halfway point up with the grain line. So now from G, you need to draw a grain line all the way down that is 38 inches. So that's for a standard size height of 5'9". So if you're doing this for the average American woman, or average woman period, most of us aren't 5'9". So you can adjust this measurement accordingly, but let's think, if we're thinking for fashion classes or thinking runway fashion, we would rather have it taller because we can always hem it up and make it shorter, but it's a lot harder to make something longer. So I'm going to go ahead and make mine for the 5'9" inch, the height of a 5'9" lady, and we're going to make this G2, G1, 38 inches. Okay, and I went ahead and marked the end G1. Okay, so now we need to find our, we'll go ahead and do the ankle measurement at the bottom. So for a size 8, we're dealing with 9.5 inches. So we need half of that to be on one side and half of that to be on the other. So we're going to take 9.5 and divide it by 2, or get a piece of paper and fold it in half. Okay, so we need to measure our ankle, or we need to write our ankle measurements here at the bottom. So our whole ankle circumference is 9.5. Half of that would be 4 3/4. So we need to take 4 3/4 and divide that in half so that we can put half on this side and half on this side. So half of 4 would be 2, and half of 3/4 would be 3/8. So I'm going to come out 2 3/8 and 2 3/8 and mark that. So this will be my A and my A1. So now we need to find our knee level. So we're going to find the halfway point between D, which I didn't label, this will be D. We're going to find our halfway point between D and the G1. So you guys know I'm a fan of folding, so let's just fold this up here. So we're just going to match my G1 to the D right here. And when you get that lined up, then you can just fold your paper and then you'll know where the halfway point is. So for me, my halfway mark is right here. Okay, we're going to go up 1 inch from that, so 1 inch towards your hip, and that's where we're going to draw our knee level. So go ahead and we're going to go up 1 inch. So I'm putting my 1 inch mark right there, squaring out, and then I'm going to go ahead and draw my knee line. Then go ahead and get your other side. This marker that's not quite even. Okay, this will be, well, we're going to get our measurements, but this will be the K side and this will be the K1. So knee and knee 1. Okay, for the K, for the measurements that we need here, we need half the total knee measurement on each side of the grain line. So our total knee measurement here is 13.5. So we divide that by 2. Well, basically divide that by 4, but we'll divide that by 2 first. So that'll give us 6 3/4, and then divide the 6 3/4 in half. So half of 6 would be 3, and half of 3/4 would be 3/8. So 1, 2, 3. So I'm coming out 3 3/8 here, and 3 and 1, 2, 3/8 here. So this now is actually really my K and my K1. Okay. So now we have that. We should just be to the part where we're connecting our lines and creating the bottom part of our garment here. So grab your long ruler. Okay, so I grabbed my long ruler and we're going to go ahead and connect. So I'm going to connect B to the K1, and right now just use your straight lines. I'm going to connect the K1 to my A1. Now I'm going to connect the K to the A. Sounds kind of funny. And my K to my C1. Okay, so we have a very angular pan at this moment, but we're going to get our curves in there. So the first curve I want to work on is the crotch curve. So grab your French curve. And we are going to make a mark 1 inch above H. And we're going to label that X. Marked here. We're going to label that X. Then we're going to grab our French curve and we're going to connect C1 to A and basically to the X, or somewhere on that line as close as we can. And it seems to fit just perfect. Okay, so this will be where we're going to cut our pattern right there along that curve, and then we'll start down here. So we don't want these angles at our knee or at our hip and our knee on the other side. So grab your grab your hip curve now. Okay, we need to find the halfway point between here and here. You can fold it again or you can measure, either way. Where should be right, well, I'm going to center between 14 inches so I can do right at 7. So I'm off 1/4 of an inch that way and 1/4 of an inch this way. But basically I'm just trying to find the middle. So whatever works for you. So I'm finding my middle here and I'm going to mark in 1/4 of an inch. So now I'm going to use my curve and I'm going to say that this seam can actually curve in right there to blend into this one by that 1/4 of an inch. So find where your ruler can reach all those points. And I'm having trouble getting it to do it all in one fell swoop here. So what I'm going to do is connect with straight lines first, and then I'll be able to blend into my straight lines. So then I'll come in here and just round that out. Okay, so now it has a slight curve right there down into this. So from here down it should still be straight. So let me see what kind of curve we ended up with, or what kind of corner. I feel like I still have too much of a corner right here on mine. So I'm going to actually blend right here too. So I actually went out just a hair, but that gives me that blend line, comes up through here and then comes right here. Nice smooth thing so I don't end up with a corner right here. So now we're going to work on this side. And on this side right here, we're going to go in 1/8 of an inch. Now we're going to take our hip curve and blend right here so that we have a smooth curve. So we can blend in up to 1/8 of an inch, taking off the crotch level, but I think we're going to get a better curve if we don't do quite that much. So I don't want to remove anything at the hip because we measured our form at the hip. So right here, I'm just going to smooth this out, and it's really not taking anything away right there. So we're still okay. So then we're going to come down to our knee, and we're going to get rid of this corner that we've created right here, the same way that we did on the other side. So just flip this over, and if you have a corner there, smooth it out. Okay, I didn't have much of a corner there, so you'll have to see what your measurements that you're using pan out to be. But right now we have a pretty smooth line all the way around our pattern. So this is our inseam, our ankle, our out seam. the waistline, and then the center front. Okay, we're going to cut this out and then we'll get started on the back. Okay, there we have our front. So I'm going to go ahead and label this. So I've already put the arrow on my grain line. I'm going to mark one notch in this crotch area so that we know that it's the front. I'm just going to choose an arbitrary place because it sews to itself, so it doesn't matter. It doesn't match to anything else but the other side. So I just chose right there. And then you can put notches on the seams if you need to, if you feel like it's stretching and you need to match this down here. But remember, on knits, we want to try to notch as little as possible so that we don't run our knits. So I'm going to go ahead and label this pant front. This is our minimal stretch. This is my size 8. And I would need to cut 2. Okay, now that I've got that labeled and we've got our pattern made, we can flip this over and start working on our back. Okay, first thing I'm going to start with is going to go ahead and do my grain line so that I have something to match up to. So I've kind of placed my pattern here on the paper to see where I want my grain line to be. And we have enough room here, so I'm going to start here. And remember, it needs to be the 38 inches, so so we're going to put our pattern on top of this, and I'm going to work kind of more towards the bottom of my paper right now because I need to have extra room up at the top. So go ahead and slide down here. In fact, I think I might make this a little bit longer and go down a little bit more. So I'm going to add to this. And I'm not going to go to the very edge of the paper because it might not be squared up. My line might not be squared up exactly. So go ahead and lay this down, and then I'm going to go ahead and trace it. Okay, we need to know where our crotch level is and our hip level. So I'm going to go ahead and mark right here, and I'm going to go ahead and mark the knee level so that I have that marked on both patterns as well. So I can set that aside for right now. And then go ahead and square out and mark your lines. Okay, so we've got our hip, our crotch, and our knee. Okay, so now we're going to work on basically this top section. The bottom part pretty much stays the same. So you can go ahead and scoot your paper down. So you can work on basically from the knee level up is what we're going to be working on. Okay, we're going to extend our crotch line out. This was our C1. We're going to extend that out a little bit farther. because our back crotch is always deeper than our front crotch. So just take your line and extend it out. Okay, and then we're going to mark on this line to, remember this is C1, and our C mark, let me get this marked back onto here. This would have been our original C. And if you don't have your other pattern right there, you can always just bring this down and that'll find your C as well. So from C to C2 needs to be 1/3 of this measurement right here. For me, this is 8 3/4. So divide that by 3, that puts us just slightly less than 3 inches because we're really close to 9. So slightly less than 3 inches. So I'm gonna come to my 3-inch mark and then come in just basically like a little over 1/8 and then mark right here. So this will now be my, oops, I'm measuring from the wrong place. We need to measure from here. So what I just said, we're gonna start right here and measure out the 3 inches, slightly less than 3 inches. So I'm gonna put my 3-inch mark and then slide just about a 1/16 in from that. So I'm really at like 2 7/8 plus 1/16 and mark. That will be your C2. Okay, then we're going to take our front pattern and we are going to connect our K. Okay, now we're going to take our back crotch level and we are going to change the depth of it because our back crotch is always longer than our front crotch and it's always a little bit lower. But we need our inseams to be able to sew together and to match. So we're going to take this, line it up at our knee level, at our K, and then we're going to aim this towards the C2. And then we're going to go ahead and trace this. So get that anchored up, get your corner. And we're going to go ahead and trace that to the knee level. So this will be where the back crotch comes to. So you can set that aside. Okay, after you have your line drawn, then go ahead and use your front pattern to connect your C1 to your C2. So we've just extended that out right there. And next we're okay, we are going to work on this top part of this back pant, and the instructions here are a little bit weird, but it works. So we just have to try to understand what she's talking about. So we're going to use our L square ruler. We're going to make sure it touches here at H and here at W1. And I've already drawn this in blue, but let me show you how I got there. So I lined up the ruler with H and then kind of slide it up or down until it touches W1. So we're touching here, and once you get that location, then you can go ahead and draw this part of the ruler, okay? So I did some of it in blue marker, and then I finished it out in pencil because I was trying to figure out where we were going from there, but that got us. So that's how I got this angle right here. And then this measurement right here, take that, and as long as you're like at 1/4 or 3/8, then that same amount needs to come out right here. And then you'll take your pattern and line up with your H1 from the front. So this is our front pattern. We're laying on top of our back pattern, and then you're gonna turn it until it comes out that same distance. So like I said, mine was 1/4 right here. So I came out 1/4 right here, and I hold down at H1 and tilt my pattern until it comes out 1/4 right here, and then trace your side seam. It shouldn't go up any because this distance has to be the same. If this comes up right here, then your front and your back seam won't match, and they have to match to sew together. So make sure that you're putting your H there, moving it out where it comes to this right here, and then mark that. Then to true up the waistline seam, go ahead and square out the 1/4 that we have right here. And then I took my French curve and I blended from here to basically my grain line, and then screwed the ruler over and blended again. But I still have my 1/4 of an inch right there, my 1/4 of an inch right here squared out, and then blended in between. And I just dropped this down It's probably at the most a quarter. It's probably a little less. It's probably like 3/16, but dip it down a little bit because you need to have that shape. So let's talk about why you need to have that shape and where it would be. So if we take our front pattern and flip it over like we were sewing these seams together, then this seam would line up right here. And now my waistline seam goes here and it curves and then it comes back up. If I had just squared this line straight over and had it stop right here, then I would have had a corner on that side seam. We don't want that. So we want our curve from our front blending right into a curve into our back. So you can check your work that way. Okay, then the other place you need to check before this is all said and done is the crotch area. So once again, I'm going to turn my front pattern over so that it would be like we were sewing these things together. And we're going to line up the front crotch seam with the back crotch seam. And we're just lining it up right here at the very top, and make sure that you have a good smooth curve right here. If you feel like it's too pointed or too something right here, then you probably need to make some adjustments to the back crotch curve and then see what you need to change to your front. So just barely right there, and I feel like I have a little bit of curve right there that I could take down just maybe like a little 1/8 of an inch or 1/16 of an inch and blend that in. But that'll be truing up your crotch curve seam. So I put a couple of notches here, but once again, this is knit. So remember, on your knit fabrics, you don't really want to have that many notches. So you might want to put these on there so you know for your pattern's sake that this is the back, but maybe not mark those on your fabric, and only mark your front notch on your fabric when you go to cut it. And that way, if your back, that you'll know your back from your front, because your back will not have any notches and your front will just have one notch. And that way you'll know what you're sewing together. So I hope that clears up the top part of this. So some of the directions or some of the things that you'll see in the book that we've been working out of are a little confusing in that area, but this ought to straighten that out for you, I hope. Okay, well, we'll get to creating, and I'll see you next time.